When we have a medical emergency on a fire incident, 3 easy steps to help you solve it will be evaluate your patient, evaluate where they need to go, and evaluate how you're going to get them there.
Our goal here is to stabilize and transport our patient to definitive care.
I think when we're talking about medical emergencies that happen on a wildland fire, there's a lot of things we need to consider. We don't normally have fires close to the hospital. We don't have incidents that are right on the street. We're not like your urban EMS or fire system. Since we're out in more remote areas, we need to be able to manage our patients for a longer period of time. It may not be, just an hour or two. It might be a couple hours, or it might be overnight.
The numbers that I looked at said more than 97% of all the injuries that we had with these smoke jumpers for 10 years were first aid, first responder, all stable patients. So absolutely, the majority, high majority of all of our medical issues or incidents on fire are stable patients.
Sounds like somebody's not feeling too well. You want me to bump out and take a look? Okay, I'm up along the top where the division break is. I can bump out and probably be there in a minute or two.
If you would, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Affirm. Break. Zulu and Operations Arsenal.
The medical emergency that occurs on a wildland fire incident is a rare event, and when it does, it happens to one of our own. And that puts us in a really bad situation. Nobody wants to deal with that, and everybody is pretty much dealing with the worst case scenario. There are some things we can do to combat that. We can train ahead of time. We can have a pre-plan of what we're going to do before the incident occurs. We can size up stuff as we're doing the size up of the fire. And then just take that simple process of evaluate the patient, evaluate their destination, and evaluate how you'll get them there.
Just
What are you doing, Arden?
around here,
That's it? Pretty much it. Okay. Feel like you need to vomit?
I already did.
All clear liquids? Or a little bit of fluid?
I think.
Yeah, it's just
Okay,
below.
why don't you take some big deep breaths?
Sure.
In through your nose, out through your mouth. Big ones.
Okay.
I'll have you guys see drive.
You want me to go down?
Getting worse?
Now it's just
Yeah,
me.
alright, I
You
got
go
it.
down
A
so
little
I
bit.
hear something.
Okay.
So once you have your patient evaluation, whether they're stable or unstable, that's going to help drive what your destination is going to be, what your definitive care for that patient is. Whether that means that person needs to go to the burn unit, or that person needs to go to the trauma center, or the community hospital, or maybe that person needs to be hiked out and be evaluated at a local clinic, or just hiked out of the elements. Maybe it's just gotten too hot for them, or their fatigue is setting in and they just need to get them out and be done for the day.
Whether it's a non-emergency medical transport or a Medevac, a medical situation on a fire can really be looked at pretty simply. Our goal here is to stabilize and transport our patient to definitive care. So the first part of that is to be able to have somebody on your incident that can look at a situation and say this is a stable patient or this is a not stable patient.
A 23-year-old male. Sounds like this started yesterday and it's just gotten worse over the last 2 days. Has had vomiting with it, muscle cramps, spasms in the hands, heart rate of about 120. We're going to start getting him a little bit of Gatorade and water. He feels like he's able to walk out, and from where we're at, I think we can do it. And if we don't have any improvement after we get up there a little bit, probably get an ambulance or a life flight headed this way.
And what I think we should do is just get an ambulance headed up bogus, and that'll meet us halfway. If something changes, we could always recommend life flight, but.
So I think another thing we need to consider is not every patient needs to come out in a litter, or not every patient needs to come out, completely immobilized. There's a lot of injuries and illnesses people might have where they're still mobile. Whatever time it took you to get to where you're going to be, probably double that to get out. You don't move nearly as fast. You don't move nearly as agile when you start talking about moving with a patient and so forth. So.
Yeah, Brad, just a change. He's cramping up quite a bit just coming down slope. So Boise's going to bump over their board. Should be here in a couple minutes. We'll just do a conveyor belt with the board down slope and then tie in with Loveless. So we're going to need at least a 20-man crew to get them down slope.
Okay, copy that. I'll get that worked out.
Yeah, he's cramping up too much. We can't get him down more than 20 feet.
When we're looking at rescue situations and we're looking at taking someone from the medical emergency to where they need to go, you need to remain flexible with it. There's so many times where little things will go wrong that if we can remain flexible and either troubleshoot it really quick or change our plan to plan B, we're going to move a lot faster. A lot of times people get bogged down into my plan is going to go this way, and then as soon as it falls apart, the whole process stops.
Transport is complicated, and I think that we need to have realistic expectations about how long that transport is going to take, even under good situations, and be prepared for extended transport.
Is there road access in there somehow? Is there a way we can get a pickup truck into them? Is there a way we can use maybe an all-terrain vehicle, or is by foot the option, or maybe helicopter's the option? I think the one thing I see a lot of times is folks have a medical emergency and it puts them into a panic mode, and they assume the first choice is always going to be, well, we'll get the Medevac helicopter in here. And I think there's a lot of times we can manage these situations with a lot simpler, safer solutions. There are certainly times we need that Medevac helicopter and we need to be prepared for it, but we got to realize that there's more than one option, and we need to be exploring all those options.
Boise dispatch is RIT on Bennett.
There we go now. There we go now. Okay, next person right here. Who's the third guy?
Then the driver's side long bin.
Want you to keep your hands across your chest.
They're on location. Break everybody on Zulu.
Copy that.
I want to clear this tack before this incident.
When we started tackling the problem, we had one person identified as the incident commander. We had one person assigned to the patient care on scene, and then one person assigned as the radio link, and then another person was assigned to evacuation problem. So they're the one who's solving how we're going to get the person out of there. So it's just almost like a incident within the incident command system. And we have, a logistics person, we got an operations person, we got a communications person, and they're just working together to solve the problem.
And previously, I think, from my experience, the EMT's the guy who wears the 20-person kit, and, they went to the class, and everybody thinks that if something goes wrong, Joe's going to take care of it because Joe's our line EMT. Everybody has to be involved, and whether those are your woofers or your licensed EMTs or your expired EMTs or your ski patrol guy, or the guy who has nothing to do with anything about medicine or stabilizing a patient but can haul a litter. But it's a crew issue. There's parts of it for everybody. We need to engage all those other people who have the training so that they have a role in these medical emergencies.
We will practice in the environment we're going to play in and we're going to work in. That's the way to do it. Try to get it realistic, but don't make it overcomplicated.
We work in an environment that's continually changing, and it is complex. And if you don't practice on the side of the hill, you're not going to be able to do your stabilization and your transport as well as you could if you practiced where you work and where you are.
It's important in your preseason to understand what your resources are in the area, what the local ambulance services are, what your local rescue services are, what your local medical facilities are, and then even say you're pre-positioned somewhere else for severity or you're covering another unit in a nearby area. Just getting a heads up of what the resources are in the area, so when you do have a medical emergency, you'll have a better idea of what the solutions might be. Having that stuff pre-identified is going to make the process when you have the emergency go so much smoother. You won't have to think about it. You already know what those things are.
You know, it's July and it's rained for 2 days and everybody's sitting around. Go pull out that trauma kit off the truck and let's do some scenarios and continue that. So it's not just the beginning of the year when everybody's focused on training. You know, I think with every plan that we make, it's important to have a plan. It's important to have a plan B, but like anything else with fire, there's still this whole concept of being flexible, and plans change and situations change and fires change and terrain changes.
You know, I think when you're making your plan, when you're doing your initial assessment and size up of the fire, you're looking for your escape routes and safety zones, and while you're doing that, consider how you would evacuate a patient if you needed to. Whatever time it took you to get to where you're going to be, probably double that to get out.
Be wary though if your plan is contingent on an aircraft. I mean, not only in an initial attack setting, but also a large fire setting. If your plan is contingent on a helicopter, it's a full-on plan. You got to have a plan B, you have to have a plan C.
A lot of times we'll trigger both at the same time. If we do decide we're going to use a helicopter, we'll get that launch, but at the same time we're launching a helicopter, we're getting ground forces mobilized as well. Any plan you have, you can't put all your faith in that one plan, because things do go wrong, or things do get caught up, or maybe that part of that plan doesn't become available anymore and now it's not an option anymore.
Boise Dispatch, Grand Creek Cops, direct.
Show you guys the early signs. You start catching them early, may prevent something later.
And nobody wants to end up in a situation with a medical emergency within their crew or their adjoining crew. But if we have some preseason training, if we look at the risk factors while we're sizing up our fire, and then manage appropriately during the incident, I think we can make these problems a whole lot easier than they are.